It's it! Get free!
Please! Please!
Please! Stay down! Stay there! Clear!
No. Oh, what's going on?
Stay where you are! Stay where you are! Stay there. Give me hands!
In the quiet market towns of Cheshire, a criminal enterprise was thriving in plain sight. At its helm stood 33-year-old Damon Greenslade, a self-styled kingpin who flaunted his wealth and power across social media. With diamond-studded teeth, thick gold chains, and wads of cash, he portrayed an image of untouchable success. But behind the flashy facade lay a sophisticated drug operation known as the Demo Line. Operating between March 2020 and June 2023, the DMO line flooded Congleton and surrounding areas with cocaine, MDMA, cannabis, and THC-laced edibles. Greenslade's network was meticulously structured, resembling a corporate hierarchy with recruiters, distributors, couriers, and middlemen. What made this operation particularly insidious was its exploitation of vulnerable youths, often minors, coerced into street-level dealing. Despite Greenslade's brazen online presence, law enforcement was quietly building a case. Operation Chekhov, a dedicated investigation by Cheshire Police, meticulously gathered evidence over several years. By June 2023, coordinated raids led to the arrest of Greenslade and his associates. In total, 13 individuals were sentenced, receiving a combined total of over 46 years in prison. Greenslade himself was handed 16 years and 4 months. This is the story of how arrogance and exploitation led to the downfall of the DMO drug empire. Damon Greenslade didn't enter the world of organized crime as a foot soldier. From the outset, his intentions were grand. Born and raised in Congleton, he built a reputation as someone with ambition, swagger, and a taste for attention. But while others sought success through legitimate means, Greenslade saw the drug trade as his fast track to influence, power, and status. By early 2020, he'd begun shaping what would become the DMO line, not just a drug route, but a brand. He gave it a name that would echo through Cheshire's underworld. Demo wasn't scrawled on back alleys or whispered in dark corners. It was promoted, marketed. He had the name tattooed across his body and turned his own persona into an advertisement for the business. His Instagram feed became a rolling reel of cash, jewelry, designer tracksuits, and thinly veiled references to the empire he was building. Greenslade didn't deal drugs on a street corner. He managed supply chains. He groomed distributors. He created a network that looked more like a franchise than a gang. During the early days of the pandemic, he saw opportunity. With towns in lockdown, traditional social networks disrupted, and police stretched thin, he expanded. His reach grew rapidly, from Congleton to Macclesfield and deeper into rural Cheshire. Children were the backbone of his early model. Teenagers, often from unstable homes or already on the periphery of the system, were approached with offers of quick cash, respect, and protection. To an outsider, they looked like ordinary kids in hoodies with phones, but they were moving cocaine in backpacks, hiding cannabis in sheds, and texting customers via burner numbers. By mid-2021, Greenslade was no longer a rising dealer. He was a criminal entrepreneur with infrastructure. The Demo line had regular suppliers, trusted middlemen, and a clear command structure. Every layer was designed to insulate Greenslade from direct risk while maximizing control. Yet for all its corporate gloss and social media swagger, the roots of the operation were rotten, built on exploitation, fear, and the illusion of untouchable power. The DMO line didn't just grow, it was engineered. Damon Greenslade approached drug distribution with the mindset of a CEO. Every role in the network had purpose. Every link in the chain was deliberate. And at its core was a system designed to maximize reach while minimizing his personal exposure. At the top were his suppliers. Two key figures, Daniel Greenslade, believed to be a close relative, and Patrick Bruce. These men were responsible for acquiring industrial quantities of cocaine and cannabis, likely from sources operating across county or international borders. They weren't frontline dealers. They were wholesalers, moving weight in bulk and feeding Greenslade the stockpile he needed to dominate the local market. With products secured, Greenslade relied on a tight group of lieutenants to manage the ground game. Chief among them were Lewis Charlesworth and Jason Acton, men trusted to oversee smaller cells of the operation. They controlled territory, coordinated runners, managed payments, and enforced discipline. Beneath them were street-level dealers and couriers, Kane Smith, Nathan Edge, Bradley Dale, and Nathan Taylor. These were the faces customers met, the ones who delivered product, collected cash, and kept the brand visible on the streets. But this wasn't a disorganized crew of young men hustling for pocket money. It was a network operating with corporate precision. Communications were conducted via encrypted messaging apps. Orders were dispatched like logistics jobs. Delivery times, drop points, and stock updates were all managed in real time. Greenslade even had logistical support. Tyler Meadows, a young woman from Congleton, acted as a storage manager and assistant, helping conceal drugs, arrange exchanges, and provide temporary safe houses. Dylan Sweeney worked as a courier, while Jed Sutton played the role of broker, ensuring supply met demand and linking Greenslade's middlemen with bulk importers. Merchandise was produced: lighters, phone cases, clothing, all bearing the DMO logo. This wasn't just a drug line, it was a lifestyle product. Greenslade wasn't trying to hide, he was trying to build brand loyalty. He used hierarchy to shield himself. Most foot soldiers never had direct contact with him. Instructions trickled down the ranks. If someone was arrested, they could only name their immediate handler. It made dismantling the organization difficult and tracing it back to Greenslade even harder. For a time, it worked. The network expanded, the profits rolled in, and the police struggled to keep pace. But cracks were forming. Damon Greenslade didn't just run a drug line, he ruled an image. Power, for him, wasn't quiet dominance. It was visual, brazen, and constant. Through diamond-studded teeth, gold chains, and endless cash displays, he crafted a persona meant to intimidate rivals, seduce followers, and mock law enforcement. He wasn't hiding in the shadows, he was performing in plain sight. The DMO line operated like a branded empire. Greenslade transformed drug dealing into a marketed lifestyle. He used social media not just to flash wealth, but to advertise directly to customers. Price drops, new product lines, even cannabis-themed treasure hunts were promoted online. Customers invited to find stashed joints hidden in public places. It was both a sales tactic and a recruitment tool. The image was seductive. Wealth without waiting, status without struggle. Behind the spectacle was a ruthless structure. Greenslade ruled through a mix of charisma, control, and cold fear. Young runners were rewarded with trainers and petty cash until they made mistakes. Then came threats, humiliation, or worse. Loyalty wasn't optional, it was enforced. And those who were arrested were quickly replaced. Technology was core to his grip. Encrypted messaging apps allowed him to manage the entire operation without meeting people face to face. He used code names, deleted chats, and digital cleanup tactics to keep investigators off balance. Even his orders to street-level dealers came via third-party numbers or ghosted contacts, making him almost impossible to trace directly, at least for a time. He also used psychological manipulation. Recruits were made to feel like part of something elite, something untouchable. The DMO merchandise, phone cases, clothing, lighters, reinforced that sense of belonging. To many, Greenslade wasn't a criminal. He was a role model. The phrase tattooed across his body, "Can't stop, won't stop," became both brand slogan and personal prophecy. For Greenslade, stopping wasn't just weakness. It was failure. Every new parcel, every new recruit, every new customer fed his sense of invincibility. But the very bravado that made the DMO line so recognizable also made it vulnerable. His insistence on staying visible, on constantly promoting himself and his empire, drew public attention. Teachers noticed students flashing cash. Neighbors, tired of the comings and goings, started talking. Anonymous tips trickled in. Greenslade's control was tight, but his ego was wider, and Cheshire police were closing in. For all its control and spectacle, the DMO line wasn't invisible. It was simply tolerated for too long. But cracks began to show in 2021. Greenslade's insistence on visibility made him a high-value target, and while his encrypted apps and compartmentalized command shielded him from immediate exposure, it also gave investigators patterns to follow. The first break came with the arrest of Kane Smith. Caught in possession of cocaine and cannabis, Smith was a known DMO courier. His arrest didn't collapse the line, but it gave Cheshire police a toehold. Shortly after, Rhys Evans, another lieutenant figure, was detained. By the time of his arrest, police had begun to piece together the scale of the operation. Greenslade's response was panic in motion. He shifted addresses frequently, avoiding detection, and even reported police drones flying overhead to his associates. He became obsessed with operational security, ordering stricter communication protocols and limiting who could contact him directly. But even this paranoia was too late. Operation Chekhov, a dedicated investigation unit, had been quietly tracking the gang's movements. Surveillance, phone interceptions, and forensic data began to connect the dots. Encrypted phones weren't entirely secure, and a key mistake sealed Greenslade's fate. During a search of his bedroom, officers recovered a mobile, later confirmed as the primary graft phone for the DMO line. That device became the linchpin. It contained message histories, contact logs, order records, a digital skeleton key to the entire operation. The evidence was overwhelming. Police now had enough to map out the hierarchy, link Greenslade to his lieutenants, and prepare for a coordinated dismantling of the gang. Still, Greenslade continued operations, convinced he was ahead of the law. But in reality, every move he made was feeding the file against him. What had once seemed like a fortress, encrypted, layered, untouchable, was now fragile. The DMO brand, once seen as unbreakable, had been breached. All the style, all the bravado, all the tattoos and gold chains couldn't undo what was coming next. The line had cracked. Now it was time to bring it down. When the DMO line finally fell, it didn't happen quietly. On a June morning in 2023, Cheshire Police launched a coordinated series of dawn raids under the codename Operation Chekhov, the culmination of over 2 years' worth of surveillance, undercover work, forensic analysis, and community intelligence. Officers stormed properties across Congleton, Macclesfield, and Greater Manchester. Dozens of officers were deployed, with tactical entry teams breaching doors simultaneously to ensure key suspects couldn't warn each other or destroy evidence. In a single day, they arrested nearly the entire hierarchy of the gang. At the center of the storm was Damon Greenslade. He was arrested in his own bedroom, where officers recovered a phone, later confirmed to be the line's operational graft handset. That one device, full of messages, contact details, and coded orders, served as a roadmap of the entire enterprise. Simultaneously, police apprehended Daniel Greenslade, his key supplier, Lewis Charlesworth and Jason Acton, two of his senior street managers, Jed Sutton, the broker, and Patrick Bruce, the cannabis wholesaler. These weren't just arrests, they were surgical strikes against every level of the organization. In the weeks that followed, officers recovered large quantities of cocaine, cannabis, and THC edibles. Burners, encrypted phones, DMO-branded merchandise, scales, and packaging materials were seized. In total, over £60,000 worth of drugs and cash was taken off the streets. A few weeks after the main raids, Tyler Meadows, the gang's logistical assistant, was also arrested. Her role in storing and moving large amounts of narcotics had come into focus through digital tracing and recovered message logs. By now, the DMO line was silent. Greenslade's ego had been replaced with silence and custody. The bravado he once wore like armor had cracked. For Cheshire Police, the operation was a textbook example of how patient, intelligence-led policing, could bring down even the most visible and seemingly arrogant of criminal enterprises. Every encrypted message, every intercepted parcel, every complaint from a concerned parent had added up, piece by piece, into an airtight case. Greenslade, who once taunted authorities with "can't stop, won't stop," now faced years behind bars. The empire had collapsed. Its founder was no longer a kingpin, just another inmate. The courtroom was heavy with anticipation as the gang's fate was finally sealed. After years of feeding addiction and flaunting arrogance, the faces behind the DMO line stood stripped of their bravado. There were no designer tracksuits, no diamond teeth, no bundles of cash, only the hard truth of sentencing day. One by one, they stood before the judge as the consequences of their actions were read aloud, their illusions replaced by cell blocks and court records. At the top of the hierarchy, Damon Greenslade was sentenced to 16 years and 4 months in prison. The judge described him as the ringmaster of exploitation, highlighting his role in recruiting vulnerable youths and orchestrating a complex drug empire masked behind social media stardom. He had marketed narcotics with the same energy a CEO might promote a new product, bold, relentless, and shameless. "You glorified drug culture and normalized criminality," the judge said, "but you did so at the expense of communities, families, and children." What truly inflamed the court was Greenslade's use of juveniles. Boys barely in their teens were handed burner phones and drug-filled backpacks, instructed to serve the streets while he flaunted cash online. The phrase tattooed across his body, "can't stop, won't stop," was read aloud in court, now sounding less like bravado and more like evidence of a man consumed by ego. Daniel Greenslade, his close relative and the gang's chief supplier, was handed 10 years and 3 months. His role had been quieter, but crucial. He sourced bulk quantities of cocaine and cannabis from undisclosed suppliers, acting as the linchpin that kept the DMO line stocked and profitable. His sentence reflected not just volume, but his sustained involvement over years. Reese Evans, described as a persistent offender who resumed gang activity even after a prior arrest, was sentenced to 7 years. The judge remarked on his indifference to legal intervention and his continued supervision of street dealers after being released on bail in 2021. Jed Sutton, a broker and facilitator between suppliers and Greenslade's core network, was sentenced to 6 years. He not only managed wholesale links but also expanded operations into affluent areas, widening both reach and risk. Lewis Charlesworth received 4 years and 6 months for coordinating day-to-day street distribution. Despite his age, the court noted his authority over younger runners, many of whom looked to him for instruction and feared the consequences of failure. Patrick Bruce received 3 years and 10 months, having played a long-standing role in expanding the cannabis side of the operation. The judge described him as profit-driven, with little regard for the consequences of his supply work. Those lower in the hierarchy faced lesser but still meaningful outcomes. Tyler Meadows received a 21-month sentence suspended for 2 years for storing and facilitating drugs. Kane Smith, a young courier, was given 16 months suspended for 18 months, with his age and early signs of rehabilitation taken into account. Jason Acton, Nathan Edge, Dylan Sweeney, Bradley Dale, and Ethan Taylor received suspended terms or community orders based on their limited roles and cooperation with the investigation. In total, over 46 years of custodial time were handed down. Outside the court, Detective Constable Sam Niemer called it a dismantling of a false empire. Yet as parents of exploited children and residents of the affected areas looked on, one quiet question lingered. How many more Damons are still out there, waiting to rise?